All right, y'all, we need to have a serious conversation about Vince Staples because he has quietly put together one of the most impressive album runs of the 2020s, starting with 2021 with the self-titled Vince Staples, followed by 2022, a year later with Ramona Park Broke My Heart, 2 years later in 2024 with Dark Times, and now in 2026, we get Crybaby. And before I get deeply into this album, I just want to off the bat say I love this album enough to grab it on a special vinyl straight from Loma Vista Recordings, which is his label now. He has gone independent, and what drew me to this immediately was the red, white, and blue tricolor vinyl that is the American flag. And Vince has had a very interesting relationship with major labels. All of these albums that I named were, except the last one, Cry Baby, were part of a deal that he had with Universal Music Group, UMG. And he has had a deal with them for quite a while, going back to 2014, where his albums were on Def Jam Records, which is under the UMG umbrella. It was Def Jam with No ID's RDM Records. And in 2019, he got handed off and transitioned to Motown, which is also under UMG. And then finally, Dark Times in 2024 completed his deal with UMG, which also came back again on Def Jam. So when you hear him rapping about criticisms of the music industry, and specifically on the Vince Staples show, there is a lot of criticism of the music industry there as well. I'm giving you this whole background to kind of give you some insight as to why he might have his qualms with the major labels. And I am very excited for him to be independent now, because it seems that artistically he was being held back by the major labels. I have seen interviews and read stuff that they wanted him to make a certain sound to fit a certain demographic because he is a certain skin color. And it's a kind of weird thing, specifically to not ask an artist to explore other genres like rock music because he needs to check boxes for urban listeners. And that is weird as hell because rock music is black music. Why would you discourage a black man of making music that black people made to begin with? But anyway, with Crybaby, he finally has full creative control, no pushback from any labels. And it's awesome because you could see that there is a concept from the cover art to the music to the cohesiveness of the whole thing being put together. There's a lot of detail, a lot of love that went into this project, and it shows. It shines through the whole thing. And Crybaby isn't his first foray into alternative music genres. He has been doing this for quite a while, but he's just never had full green light to do it for a whole project. So for example, on Dark Times, one of my favorite songs on there, Black and Blue, samples a really awesome band called The Sacred Souls. So with Crybaby, you have a whole album of that. And I just wanted to show you guys the front and back of this. It is a literal Crybaby with a diaper of an American flag. And at first thought, just like pretty much everyone else, I thought that was Donald Trump on the cover, but he did do an interview with Apple Music clarifying that that is not a baby version of Donald Trump. That baby is supposed to be you, us, the listener. And he goes on to further clarify that that's the socio-political system in which we adopt and complain about at the same time. And as we complain and as we operate within these things without wanting to break apart from them, you are feeding the baby, the beast, so to say. And this album is about the different ways in which you can do that. In my opinion, it seems like his last few albums have been a bit more introspective, where in this album he's kind of holding a mirror up to us and reflecting back what we as a society in this country are kind of facing. And it's pretty freaking cool that an artist, as he ages, his content about what he raps about matures with him. The rap game is a young man's game, so if you age gracefully, you're doing yourself a favor and your listeners are going to really appreciate that. Some standout tracks For me, on Crybaby, the lead single Blackberry Marmalade has a lot of influence of early Neptunes for me, and a thing that you hear throughout this album is lots of guitars and lots of frantic live drumming. It is essentially Vince Staples rapping over a live band, which I think is really cool. Next song that stood out for me, TV Guide, was essentially telling us to turn off the televisions and stop being fed what they are feeding us. The Big Bad Wolf is an interesting one. I think the standout track of the album. From what I've read, a lot of people love this song as well. So in this one, he flips the very classic, famous vocal sample from Slick Rick's children's story, specifically the line "Cop shot the kid," which I remember off the top of my head. Kanye flipped on a song he produced for Nas during the Wyoming summer EPs that he produced for everyone. And in this one, Vince flips the sample into a paranoid looping nightmare about police violence. And the repetition of that sample really comes to show you how nothing has really changed since Slick Rick recorded his song, how exhausting and cyclical the systemic issues that we are facing. Another standout for me was Do You Know the Devil, which opens with a literal sound of a crying baby. Immediately made me think of the crying baby on the cover. And these are the small details that I really appreciate on a musical project. The crying baby, it is a representation of a divided country that is asking us, do we really know who the real devil is? And that can be left up to interpretation. We all have a different version of the devil, but it's cool to be asked that question. And then finally, Caught In is sort of like an emotional climax for this album. It was also a single that had a music video. It deals a lot with the historical weight of racial trauma and the commodification of black art. And this album really doesn't have any skips for me. It is a 35-minute long album. It really is one of my favorite things about Vince Staples is that his projects are always very concise with very little filler. For me, this is one of my favorite projects of the year. With that said, it is an album that I originally scored a perfect 10 out of 10. I listened to it about 30 times over the course of a week, and the more I listened to it, the lower that number became, but no lower than a 9. It is a solid 9 still. It won't be any lower than that, and I'll give you my reasoning for that is this is Vince's first true foray into complete creative artistic freedom. So what we have here is version 1 of something that is very beautiful that is going to unfold over the next 2 or 3 albums. Some of my favorite artists have had runs like this where once they find their unique voice and they have the creative freedom to follow that unique voice, beautiful things unfold after that. So with this one, I think he was just getting his feet wet into this new sound, and while it was very much appreciated from my end, it plays it a little safe. Still one of my favorite projects of the year. Like I said in the beginning of this video, we really need to start including Vince Staples into some serious conversations because he's been giving us fire, and I feel he is a very underappreciated artist. So Crybaby, 9 out of 10. See you next time. Peace.